الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first series of IQA International Webinar 2020 Higher Education Accreditation Amidst COVID-19 and New Normal, Opportunities and Challenges. I would like to welcome Professor T. Basaruddin, MSc, PhD, President of IQA and Director of Executive Board, National Accreditation Agency for Higher Education, or BANPT, Indonesia. Professor Insinyur Dr. Khairul Saleh bin Muhammad Sahari, Deputy Chief Executive Officer for Quality Assurance, Malaysian Qualifications Agency. Dr. Sohail S. Bajamal, Executive Director, National Center for Academic Accreditation and Evaluation, Saudi Arabia. Professor Olgun Cicek, International Relations Coordinator, YODAK, North Cyprus. Professor Fatul Wahid, MSc, PhD, Rector of Universitas Islam Indonesia. Professor Dr. Hajah Amani Burhanuddin Umar Lubis, LCMA, Rector of Universitas Islam Negeri Syarif Hidayatullah, Jakarta, Indonesia. And Dr. Jawahir Shaheen Al-Mudhaki, Chief Executive, Education and Training Quality Authority of Bahrain. And every participants from Bahrain, Indonesia, Malaysia, Northern Cyprus, Saudi Arabia, and any other countries from around the world. Today is our first session of the first series entitled Higher Education Accreditation Survival in the Time of COVID-19. Before we start, I would like to remind the participants who wish to receive e-certificate. We will share the link through Zoom chat box later. And we will begin our webinar today with opening, followed by webinar session 1, questions and answer session, and will be closed with closing and announcement. Firstly, I would like to invite the President of IQA and Director of Executive Board, National Accreditation Agency for Higher Education, or BANPT Indonesia, Professor T. Basaruddin, MSc, PhD, to give the opening remark and keynote speech. To Professor T. Basaruddin, MSc, PhD, the Zoom is yours.
Thank you very much, Reski. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
My dear friend, member of the IQA Executive Board, distinguished speakers, rectors, professors, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed my great pleasure to welcome you all to the first session of webinar series held by the Association of Quality Assurance Agencies in Islamic World, or better known as IQA. This webinar is held in response to the unprecedented challenges that we all have to face, impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. The webinar will be held in series covering three major themes, reflecting three main perspectives, namely external quality assurance, internal quality system, and quality standards and criteria. The first theme, which will be held in two sessions that will take place today and next Tuesday, exactly a week from now. Inshallah, with God will, the second and third theme will be held in February or April next year. Today, we will be focusing our attention on how external quality assurance agencies are responding to the pandemic. We are very fortunate to have three prominent and globally known experts in quality assurance that will be sharing their experiences in managing external quality assurance agencies process amidst COVID-19 pandemic. The session will be chaired by the former president of IQA, my dear friend, Dr. Jawahir, which undoubtedly has vast experiences and knowledge in the area of quality assurance. Before closing this remark, let me say a few words of thanks to all parties that have supported the IQA in making this webinar happen. I thank especially all the speakers and discussions for your willingness to share your expertise and experiences in this very important event. I thank also Professor Fatul Wahid, Rector of Universitas Islam Indonesia, or Indonesian Islamic University, Professor Amani Lubis, Rector of Universitas Islam Negeri Syarif Hidayatullah, Jakarta, and Professor Abdul Haris, Rector of Universitas Islam Negeri Malang, for their tireless support to IQA that makes this webinar is smoothly implemented. My highest appreciation also goes to Dr. Hangga Fatana, Professor Mansur Maksum, and all members of the organizing committee for all the hard work in preparing and organizing this webinar. Finally, with Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, I declare this webinar is officially open. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for the opening remark, Professor T. Basaruddin, MSc, PhD. Without further ado, I would like to invite our session chair, Dr. Jawahir Shaheen Al-Muzaki. But before that, please let me introduce her. Dr. Jawahir Al-Muzaki is the Chief Executive of the National Authority for Qualifications and Quality Assurance of Education and Training, or QQA, Bahrain, since 2008. She has begun her career at the University of Bahrain in January 1988, where she held several academic and administrative positions. The last position was as the Vice President for Administration and Financial Affairs, where prior to it, she She served an advisor to the president. She is an active member of or president in a number of national, regional, and international boards, including International Network for Quality Assurance Agencies in Higher Education, Association of Quality Assurance Agencies of the Islamic World, Arab Network for Quality Assurance in Higher Education, the Arab Council for Universities Quality Assurance and Accreditation, and Higher Council for Training. She is a panel member in the Committee of the Women Empowerment Work and a commissioner in the Commission of Prisoners and Detainees' Rights. Dr. Al-Mudhaki was also the editor-in-chief of the Arab Journal of Accounting and a board member in Accounting and Auditing Authority in the GCC, Supreme Council for Women, the Higher Education Council, and Academic Association and the Bahraini Accounting Association. She earned her bachelor's degree in accounting in 1985 from the University of Bahrain, her master's degree in accounting from the University of Denver, United States of America, and doctorate degree in accounting in 1996 from the University of Exeter, the United Kingdom. And now, please welcome our session chair for today, Dr. Jawahir Shaheen Al-Mudhaki. Dr. Jawahir Shaheen Al-Mudhaki, the Zoom is yours.
Thank you very much, dear. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It gives me a great pleasure to be here in the Islamic Equality Association's first webinar. As you know, the period now is very critical in the whole world with the COVID-19 impact on all of our life. Education is one of the most important parts in life. And today in our webinar, we will be presenting to you 3 presenters from all over the Islamic world, from different areas, starting from the Far East to the Middle East and the Mediterranean area. After that, we will be from 2 distinguished rectors of universities in Indonesia. Our first speaker, Dr. Suhail Bajamal. Dr. Bajamal is an academic orthopedic spine surgeon. He's a researcher, educator, and leader. He was an advisor for multiple national and international organizations. He is a certified surveyor for the Central Board for Accreditation of Healthcare Institutions and certified professional in healthcare quality and a certified professional in patient safety. Currently, Dr. Bajamal is the executive director in the National Center for Academic Accreditation and Evaluation of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He will be presenting to us on the role of Education and Training Evaluation Commission and Equality Assurance of Higher Education in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia during and post COVID-19. Dr. Suhail, the floor is yours to start your presentation. Fadal.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mudhaki. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's truly a great honor to be in the first session as the first presentation of this very inspiring IQA under the leadership of Professor Basruddin and our colleagues in the board of this great organization. As Dr. Al-Madhaki mentioned, inshallah, over the coming 15 minutes or so, I will take you through the journey of the Education and Training Evaluation Commission, the entity in Saudi Arabia, and all the support that it gets from the government in ensuring that the higher education quality is assured throughout this pandemic without any disruption. So I'll take you through this journey very briefly, talking about ETIC and NCAA, the center that I'm leading, as well as what were the challenges when we started back in January and February, when we started thinking about the different options. What were the challenges, how the business continuities continued, and what sort of support we have provided for institutions. I'll go through each one of them very briefly. So ETIC, or the Education Training Evaluation Commission, is an independent entity. It's an autonomous body that reports directly to the Prime Minister, and that gives us a very unbiased opinion, giving opinions on the evaluation, assessment, and accreditation of both education and training, both in the private and public sectors, with the goal of enhancing the economy and development. Our board of directors and the governance model is consists of multiple members from different ministries. There are only 2 members out of the employees of ETIC in this board, and this gives us a very, again, transparent governance model to ensure that all the stakeholders agree with our plans. We have 4 centers: the K-12, the school, the higher education, the vocational training, quality assurance centers, as well as an independent center for assessment. The NCAA, it started as a commission in 2004, but recently, 4 years ago, was part of a merger into the ETIC, and it's the only body in charge of the academic accreditation, quality assurance of academic programs. We as well licenses international accreditation agencies. So with this overview, when we started back in February, we had these statistics. We had institutions that are in the process of accreditation. Many of them have submitted their self-study reports. We have more than 200 programs who have submitted their study reports, self-study programs. We have as well, so there are many work that were about to be implemented, but then we had the pandemic, which delayed some of these processes. So we had really to think about the challenges back then in February. We were not sure how long this crisis is going to extend to. We were not sure will there be more expansion and the magnitude of the crisis. There were variability in the maturity level and responses of higher education institutions. Internally, we were focusing on the business continuity. How can we engage the stakeholders? How can we learn, as you'd notice, the international practices? We cannot say best practices because it's new for everyone. It was a shock for everyone, but in our risk analysis, we had similar situation in terms of what would happen if we have a disruption of our regular businesses. So we activated that risk management plan. So the consequences, we were thinking back then in February, how can we continue to provide academic support? How can we maximize the benefit and minimize the academic loss? We don't want to exaggerate the losses and the challenges that are there. We want to support really the higher education institutions in achieving their academic goals. So our decisions were at I would say three major perspectives. The perspective of business continuity. So we activated the crisis management team. We updated our risk register. We focus on our staff capacity building quite a lot. And we psychologically, capacity building, technically in terms of digital transformation. We activated the digital transformation faster than our initial plan. We had an evaluation study. It's not an accreditation, an independent evaluation study that was supposed to be done face-to-face. We switched that immediately into virtual visits. And then we prepared a very formal evidence-based proposal to our governing body to switch into the hybrid virtual accreditation visits. For the post-COVID-19, we started thinking about that in February, even earlier than that, about the governance framework for the quality assurance of e-learning. So we planned all of this simultaneously back in February. So I'll take you in a journey very quickly. These are the 4 domains that the Education and Training Evaluation Commission, I would say the major domains that we supported the higher education institutions. We conducted through the National Center for Assessment, or QIAS Center, we conducted the National Achievement Test. It's a college admission test that the universities use. They have been using for the past 20 years. So if we stop it this year, then that will disrupt their whole system of student admission. We conducted that through artificial intelligence to our students at home. We conducted a nationwide comprehensive evaluation study of institution responses to COVID-19. We implemented the hybrid virtual visits, and we updated the e-learning and distance education quality assurance. So I'll take you the first one. More than 65% of students sitting for or entering colleges this year have sat for the artificial intelligence test at their homes, and 35% were tested at the testing center with observing the health instructions for the distancing and the precautions. For the nationwide comprehensive evaluation study, we were one part of a comprehensive K-12 vocational training and higher education study. The center was responsible for this. It was a mixed method study, including document review, faculty virtual interviews to ask them about how did they manage the COVID-19, and all the aspects and the themes were there regarding the academic support, the technical support. We reviewed a sample of educational portals and learning management system for some institutions, and we sent questionnaires and these are the number of responses, more than 27,000, close to 28,000 students and around 9,000 faculty. We asked them about the teaching and learning during COVID, what kind of support, what kind of guidance, and assessment and evaluation used, and how did they use the technology. So it's a very comprehensive study for higher education that was conducted. Now, for the hybrid virtual accreditation visit, which is the bulk of this presentation, we went through a very methodological, starting with the planning phase, the setting the policies and procedures, the approval, the implementation, and then the monitoring, the continuous monitoring. Briefly, I will take you through each one of them very briefly. For the planning phase, for example, we did a comprehensive situational analysis in Saudi Arabia, and international scan of what other countries are doing and how they're doing it, and what are the recommendations and lessons learned. And then we assess the readiness of our institutions in Saudi Arabia. This is, I'm not going to go through the whole slide, but this is part of the situation and analysis of what we have done. There are many factors that demanding this switch, because as I mentioned, close to more than 150 programs and institutions have submitted their self-study reports and have submitted their data. So if we delay that, then there will be a delay of more than a year for them, and repetition of the work and wasting of resources and what have you. We have limitation of travel, we have limitation of international travel, and for the factors favoring the switch, we have success stories and as I mentioned, conducting this evaluation studies in private universities, in conducting this virtual pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. So all of these were success stories that made us really believe that we could, inshallah, succeed in this. We reviewed the international scan, all of these countries. We basically summarized what were their recommendations and lessons learned from the planning perspective, from the implementation perspective, from the quality assurance perspective. And we utilized some of these lessons learned and international scan in really updating our virtual visits accreditation policies and procedures specifically. Before we start, we asked our colleagues, more than 97 leaders of quality in the universities. We asked them, do you agree to implement the virtual site visits? Are your university ready? What's your expected level of accuracy, and so on. So this is just to get a sense, are people ready for that? Once we get generally more than 80% positive responses, we went ahead and start doing the policies and the procedures. So as you can see here, the general policies are exactly the same. This is a comparison between our conventional visits and the hybrid visits. You can see the general policies are identical. The forms, the required documents, the conflict of interest, the schedule, the accreditation decisions, they are exactly the same. For the virtual visits, we have additional policies for virtual visits. For the pre-visit procedures, again, they are identical to the conventional visits, but we added additional procedures for orientation and webinars and manual and admin support coordinator dedicated for each visit. During the visits, they are identical to the conventional visit, but we added additional procedures such as having the camera always on, the review panel meetings virtually, the facilities tour through the live transmission, and remote access to LMS and databases. The number of interviews and interviewees were identical in both sessions. The visit schedule were identical in both modes, but because of what we call it, the interviews fatigue in virtual meetings, instead of having 3 days, we extend the virtual visit into an additional days, but with the same number of interview sessions and encounters with leaders, but it were spanned shorter days, but more days. The post-visit procedures were exactly identical. These are some of the specific policies for the hybrid virtual visits in terms of the technical support, having the camera on, and the guidance of the review panel. If he or she decides to have an on-site visit, then that will be their decisions, in addition to the live streaming and live broadcasting of the facilities tour to the review panel. The approvals, after we get all of these policies, we presented again to the higher education. We told them, higher education institutions, we told them, this is what we have done. This is the situation. These are the policies and procedures. Do you want us to go ahead? And before conducting each of these visits, we will get their permission, because there was a change in the contract, and they will give us our permission to conduct this virtually. We get the approval of the advisory committee, the executive committee of ethics, and the board of director.
Dr. Suhail, you have 2 minutes to finish, please.
Yes, sure, I'm almost done. We implemented this in a pilot fashion, gradually started with the first week in few. Before we start the real visits, we start piloting, and then a gradual increase of the number of visits per week. These are some of the numbers. So far, we have, starting September till now, we have 77 virtual visits, more than 1,800 sessions, a total of 90,000, more than 90,000 minutes. Each day, the visit consists of 4 days. Each day there are 6 visits. These are the number of reviewers who were involved, academic reviewers who were involved in conducting these visits. There are more than 9,000 participants in these visits, whether students, faculty members, academic leaders, stakeholders, business stakeholders of the universities. We get, these are the 20 operational logistics specialties. I owe them, after Allah's will and help with the success of this, they were really the champions of making this success. These were dedicated solely for this project, and this is part of them, I would say half of them from NCAA, and the other half were from other centers who really provided us with support with their staff and employees to ensure this are successful. And then we have 16 consultants. These are the number of reviewers, more than 300 reviewers. They come from 25 countries. These are the largest 5 countries that our reviewers come from. We did continuous improvement and monitoring, and we improved our procedures accordingly, whether it's focus group, questionnaire, interim reports, and then we will have, by the end of the term and by the end of the academic year, we'll have a full report with all the details, with all the challenges, and then we'll present it to the board of directors to decide. This is the last point that we supported our higher education institutions. We implemented a new model of quality assurance of e-learning of distance education. Currently, we have an independent center called the National E-Learning Center. It's an independent from ETIC. They do the licensing, but then we do the provisional accreditation of these programs to ensure that the planning and proper planning and quality assurance are done, and we do the final programmatic accreditation. This is up and running, and it's approved by the board of directors, and programs can start implementing now. I really appreciate all the unlimited support and help that we are getting from the government to ensure that the higher education is to the best quality, regardless of any challenges, any pandemic, any difficulties that we face, and to all of these higher education institutions who were instrumental in making this projects successful and other projects of NCAA. Thank you, Dr. Al-Mudhaki, and sorry for taking a couple of minutes more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Suhail Bajamal. It's very interesting and it's very informative and highly a great chance to learn from the process that's been taking place in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It's very active, and we congratulate you for all of these good work. I will leave the discussion for my colleagues, the discussant, but I have to say that I've been a witness for all the progression that's been happening there. So congratulations on all of these efforts and the success of their outcomes. Thank you very much. Our next speaker, Professor Olgan Sisek. Professor Sisek, he is a lifetime learner and an expert on higher education studies, mainly in internationalization policy and development, accreditation, and equality assurance areas. He has 25 years of experience in higher education institutions. These years were spent in teaching, research, accreditation, and equality assurance and networking in global higher education in Europe, Mediterranean, Middle East, Far East, and in the USA. Currently, Professor Olgan is the executive board member at UDAC Higher Education Council from North Cyprus. Professor Olgan, the floor is yours, and please. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate, and Assalamu alaikum, and I also welcome to all the participants. It's really a pleasure also for me to present in this distinguished platform under the IQA. So I will try to make it a little bit broader perspective and mainly from the region, as you said, the Mediterranean and European perspective as well. So before I go into my presentation, the points, let me just introduce what I have been experiencing since last March 2020, like all of you do most probably. We have been discussing all these issues through the Zoom or other platforms since then, and I believe nothing is left out of these discussions. So I was happy to hear my colleague Dr. Suhail's presentation and it's really appreciated and a good job done. I congratulate them. That's the way forward. I think most of us, even in our agency, YODAC, we did the similar works, and I'm sure most of the quality assurance experts and the agencies are doing this similar works all around the world, because we are on the same boat. So we are experiencing the same challenges, and we have to find a way out altogether by sharing and exchanging the best practices. That's what we are aiming even today's session. And also the IQA mission is support its members, agencies, as well as the higher education institutions. So having said that, we can now come to the point where we have to look way forward. And when I look the way forward for the future, what we have learned so far, I think we need an agile leadership to come out of all this loop or the unprecedented, unpredicted times. In order to do that, we have to accept the uncertainty. We have to accept the change. We have to adapt ourselves. We have to be flexible, and we have to be creative. We have to have the inclusion of all. So we cannot isolate ourselves from any other institutions or any other countries and any other industry at all. So therefore, we have to collaborate at the end of the day. So having this introduction, like I'm sure most of you have this similar feelings. So I would like to share my screen with the permission of our organizers, and let's start the main points that I highlighted on my presentation to share with you today. So it is the survival in the time of COVID. So it's really surviving for us. So what has been, I would like to give you a broad outlook, because I was in the US when the pandemic started last March. So I experienced half part of the pandemic there from the USA perspective or the North American perspective. And then I came back to Cyprus, and now involved with Sienka and ENCA. So we are experiencing the European as well as the Mediterranean perspective. So I can try to combine what I have been experiencing and would like to share and highlight some points for maybe further discussion with the dear participants. So when the COVID started, then immediately people realized that something is happening. So it's a new reality, although we call it new normal, but maybe it's not normal, but it's the reality, I should say. And with that real reality, we start having some quick responses, some rapid and quick decisions. And later on, we realize some of them are correct, some of them are not applicable. So we had to adjust and change. So this phase, at the beginning, we spent maybe, if you put in percentage ways, like 30–40% of our effort was to understand what's going on and maybe to give a quick response. So the second phase was, yes, we accepted that, yes, this is our new normal, so we have to live with it. And so how are we going to do that? So another 30–40% of our effort goes into this part, which is going through the available resources, whether it is financial or human or any technical and infrastructure whatsoever. Then we evaluate it and start monitoring how it is going on. Are we on the right track? So should we do something more on that? So having spent all 80% of our efforts, and now we come to the third phase, I should call, and these are all shared internationally, I guess. So what we should do for the way forward? So what's the future will be like, look like, and what should have be done more to cope with it? So that third stage, maybe we spend 20% of our effort on that. But I think at this moment, when we are hopefully coming towards the end of the COVID, and then maybe within a few months or a year time, we'll be better off. But we have to find the adaptation, the way to creativity. And I call this like it's digital era now. So everything is digitalizing, like we are doing now. In the past, we had to travel thousands of miles and spend lots of time and money to reach resources, to make a conference, to exchange ideas for a panel discussion and so forth. But now we can do it in in a click and within an hour time. So that's really a new digitalized era. So maybe we have to find out the advantages and to get the benefit of all these as well. So the third stage is now still going on, and we are trying to adapt and be creative and be flexible and adaptable and look for the better future with the digitalization. So when we look at the big picture, I think the DNA of higher education is changed. So when I heard this first in one of the webinar in the US, I really liked that very much. And the second phrase was, the higher education journey is muted. Yes, it was muted for 3 months or 6 months, or maybe still it's muted. It's not that we can access and we can go beyond what we are looking for. So therefore, the DNA of higher education is changing. We have to realize that we have a really important mission to cope with and to support the industry stakeholders as quality assurance agencies, or as IQA or ENQA or INCAE. All these responsibilities are there. So when we look at the changes and challenges, what's happening, yes, it happens all around the higher education, whether it is the instructional challenges. Now, the first thing that we, in the phase one, we realized, yes, we have to shift from face-to-face to online. Then, which instruments to use? The methodologies changed. So how the method of instruction changed to virtual. The institutional change in terms of structures, the hierarchy, the coordination, the departments and new units and so forth. The societal change is there. It has got some sociological and psychological perspective as well. And more important for us as quality assurance agencies is the regulations. So the regulatory challenges are the foremost maybe. So when I come back to Yodak and we realize that we don't have anything in the online delivery in our bylaws, so we had to propose to the Council of Ministers to change quickly, adapt the legislation so that we can allow higher education institutions to do at least 40 or 50% of their teaching online and so forth. I'm sure most of you have these kind of challenges and adaptations. So I don't want to go into the details. I mean, thanks to Dr. Suhail, really, he very well presented. More or less, we did the similar things in our agency, but these were something unpredictable and really so quick in such a short notice, let's say, in a way. So we had to find a new model, even for the QAA. Universities, yes, they find their way in terms of online delivery, in terms of other commitments with the industrial training or internships, practical works, labs, whatsoever. But in the accreditation agency side, we have lots of changes coming as well. So we have been deeply affected as well. So external assurance, quality of external assurance is now really important, especially in the online delivery that is questioned. So we have to find a way for that as well. So some of the discussion topics that I would like to highlight, and maybe we can go into depth later in the Q&A or discussion session. But just to highlight some of the main topics that we are really face challenges is the legislation of online evaluation. As I said, that's something like a must. We all have to think and find a way for that as well. It seems that even if the pandemic, post-COVID-19, we will be having some online programs and some hybrid teaching, and I should say some of the students are very much adaptive, and maybe they prefer that as well. If not the some of the faculty members, but this has got some advantages as well. So we have to be prepared for that quality assurance of the online evaluation. The procedures for quality assurance during the remote teaching is from our perspective, is also important. When you look at the quality assurance agencies, during our site visits, it was something different practices, but when it comes to the online meetings and report writings for the review committees or online discussions like this, then things have a little bit changed. So we have to maybe cope with these challenges as well. The methodologies and the technology that we use is changing. So we have to maybe spend some budget for the infrastructure of IT technology, the softwares, and to make sure the data protection or to secure the websites and so forth, and the communication tools like Zoom to make it more official and organization-wide and more stronger. So the technical infrastructure is really an important step to be taken. The virtual site visits, uh, I think that's really a challenging area for my colleagues in the quality assurance agencies. It is working, yes, every one of us doing one way or another, but we have to make sure that we are doing it properly, and we have to really, again, make sure that the assurance of the quality is there. So we have to find a framework or methodology for that. And evaluation of the online assessment methods and tools. This is a big discussion area, so we have to take this under control as well. The meetings, the sessions, or the virtual visits, in terms of timings, in terms of time limits, because we spend hours in sitting in a chair and talking to many lecturers or students during the site visits, hours and hours of discussions. So it's really very much the time zone, time differences, if any. So all these are, for the international experts, for example, all these are challenges that we have to accept and find a way forward. In terms of teaching and learning process, also the evaluation and assessments are important. Protecting the online data and confidentiality of interviews. For example, when you do an online virtual visits, are you going to record that? So after recording, how it will be restored? And the confidentiality and the protection of this data is another issue, responsibility for the agencies and the expert teams as well. So the challenges in terms of evaluating the internships, practical lab works. That's, I think, major challenge area for STEM courses and the health science as well. So we are working on finding some measures and ways to cope with this as well. As I said at the beginning, flexibility, creativity is really important during these COVID times. So the accreditation agencies also have to be flexible. What they did in most part of the Europe and maybe on the globe as well, they extend the accreditation validity periods if it's about to end in 6 months or a year time. So they postponed and extended for another 6 months or a year. And they postpone their visits for maybe another 3 to 6 months and so forth, even if there is a report to be submitted, deadlines to be met. So it was a little bit flexible, giving all these opportunities to the stakeholders. Support and guidance to higher education institutions is really foremost, whether by the ministries or whether by the quality accreditation regulators or agencies, whatever you name it. It's really important to be on the same side and give a support as well. Many agencies prepared guidelines and procedures for. Oh, is it? Oh dear. Okay, conducting virtual visits. So that's another important issue. Remote and hybrid delivery is getting like a must for the moment, and maybe in the coming times for a certain period. We have to find a way for that. As I said, flexibility and adaptability in this kind of emergency situation is very important. We have to be innovative and, as an accreditor, flexible also. We cannot be rigid like we used to be, maybe, as it was complained sometimes. But this is the reality. We have to learn how to cope with all these issues. So when it comes to my agency, just briefly, as I said, we did lots of work, like Dr. Suhail mentioned, the classic pathway. We also walked on that route and prepared the guidelines, and the roadmap was there. And we successfully, I believe, managed this time of COVID. And now we are preparing for the hopefully last phase post-COVID, and to way forward in the future to come up with the new regulation, with the new methodology, and more connected and more cooperated higher education world I would expect not only within the country, but also within the region and even beyond. So thank you very much, and I'll be happy to have the questions or discussions later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Olgan. It was very interesting presentation, and it's provoking lots of ideas to think about. Prior to the pandemic, I mean, people were like discussing what will happen now. We need to work out so many things with the fourth industrial revolution. Everybody was busy with that matter. From what you were saying and what's showing, actually, it shows as if the pandemic been accelerating with what is required for the fourth revolution in terms of utilization of technology and all of these things, and how it did change the DNA, as you said, of higher education. It's actually changed the DNA of the whole education and our whole life system, social, you can name it in that sense. Thank you very much. It's very interesting. And we look forward for the questions that will come later on with discussion from our discussant. Dear friends, colleagues, our next speaker is Professor Khairul Saleh bin Mohammed Sahari. Professor Khairul is a professional engineer. He is certified in the Board of Engineering in Malaysia. He's also a chartered engineer registered with the Engineering Council in the UK. Professor Khairul is a corporate member of the Institution of Engineers in Malaysia and Institution of Mechanical Engineers UK, and senior member of the Institution of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, IEEE. He is a researcher in the field of robotic, mechatronics, control, and artificial intelligence. Currently, Professor Dr. Khairul Sahari is the Deputy Chief Executive Officer Quality Assurance at Malaysian Qualification Agency in the Ministry of Education of Malaysia. On your behalf, I welcome Professor Khairul, and please, the floor is yours. Tafadhal. Sound, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Jawahir, and all the viewers and listeners out there. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon from Malaysia. So my name is Khairul, and I'm going to present what we in Malaysia have been doing through this COVID-19 pandemic. So a little bit of background regarding our agency. So MQA is the sole agency in the country, in Malaysia, in charge of accreditation of higher education programs in the country. And on top of being the accreditation body, we also implement the qualifications framework. We are in charge of the national qualifications framework. We develop criteria and standards. And then we also have the register in which all these accredited programs is being registered into. And as of today, we have more than 15,000 programs already accredited throughout the country when we talk about full accreditation. And in total, more than 17,000 programs altogether have received either provisional or full accreditation. Okay, and this is just a glimpse of what our register looks like. So this is a database that contains all the accredited programs in the country, and it is accessible throughout the world. So anyone from anywhere around the globe can actually have access to this database and actually refer to it to find out what are the programs being accredited in Malaysia. Okay, and so what have happened so far in Malaysia? So we have been on what we call as the movement control order since March, and it is now extended until the end of the year. And what was the main issue with this, the announcement of the movement control order, or the MCO, was that at that point of time in March, all activities, including the education sector, has to be put on hold. So meaning to say that no physical classes can take place, no physical lectures can take place. And we can see that due to this announcement, there was a surge in online or remote learning. And based on our survey, we have found out that at that point of time, 94.1% of the institutions have swiftly changed or moved towards or transitioned towards online or remote learning. And by now, I believe 100% of all the institutions in the country have moved towards online or remote learning. And our response to this announcement by the government was to actually issue, one of our response was to issue advisory notes to assist and facilitate our providers, our students, on how to cope or to adapt with the situation. And our advisory notes do contain information regarding adjustments to quality arrangements during the crisis. And we also have engagements with other professional bodies, because besides MQA, we have other professional bodies who assist us in conducting accreditation for professional programs such as engineering or medicine or pharmacy. So the advisory notes come in stages, and at the first part of the pandemic, we issued guidelines on various adjustments on teaching and learning, the practical training, because majority of our programs, especially at the undergraduate level, has internship or practical industrial training component inside the program. So they need to adjust that as well. The student assessment parts, the grading, the semester system as well. So this is in context with the immediate closure of the higher education institutions at that time. And once the government relaxed a bit on the order, then we issued another guideline on how these institutions can adjust to the online and remote learning requirements. Especially when we talk about issues of assessments, the teaching and learning, as well as the practical or industrial training. And there are also specific guidelines on specific programs that we issue program standards, for example, accounting or hospitality and tourism, art and design, and so on. So there are specific guidelines that we also issue for specific program standards. And the basis of this advisory notes is basically to give, to have these guiding priorities in order to support the government in fighting the COVID-19, to ensure the progression of the learners or the students. But the most important thing is to ensure that the quality of the programs are still intact, so that to ensure the prospect of career opportunity for the future graduates. And in terms of the what we also do is basically we have the new norms, okay, the modification of the face-to-face or to online remote learning, which also include practical industrial attachment, practical components to be substituted, supported by simulation gamification or augmented reality, work-based learning or industrial attachment to be substituted with industry-based project or problem-based project. So these are some of the things that we put in our advisory notes. We also provide flexibility to the institutions to rearrange of online remote assessments in meeting the student learning outcomes. And subject matter experts are responsible to determine the best possible alternative assessments within the respective institutions of higher education learning. Providers may also modify the students' grading system. So instead of having letter grade as what they normally do, they can actually allow the Senate of the institution may actually allow institutions to change to a pass and fail or a different grading system as well. But whatever they have do in terms of the mitigation processes, they must actually inform the students and clarify and explain things properly to the students, as well as the lecturers as well. Okay, and in terms of we also issue guidelines in how teaching can be done in a micro-learning, micro-credential mode instead of the normal credit-based courses. So the institutions have the flexibility to also change the existing courses to become micro-credential based courses as well. And that can actually allow for a smaller size courses to be offered to the students. And this may actually be more beneficial or more suitable in the time of pandemic, such as COVID-19. And from the internal quality prospect or aspect, the internal quality unit is responsible to monitor whatever the changes, interventions that took place, and also to actually also include the welfare of various student groups, as well as to actually not just the students, but the lecturers as well, because some of the lecturers may not be, maybe majority of the lecturers are not well versed with online learning, online teaching. So there must be a proper training process or training programs in place to ensure that the transition towards online teaching is also smooth as possible. Okay, and IQA also is in charge of identifying issues and challenges faced by the staff and to provide support to them. Okay, and other things that we also do, we also have our normal business to be also shifted towards online. We normally have our client day, which we now convert into a virtual client day. We also have our audit as explained by our previous speakers. We have now virtual audits on top of our normal physical audits. And then this will be explained further in the next few slides. And before I go into the virtual audit, just to actually explain that in Malaysia, we have a specific code of practice that is being used for program accreditation for open and distance type programs or ODL programs. So this is already in place since before the pandemic. And if we look at the number of institutions offering ODL type programs, we have roughly about 117 institutions offering ODL, and a total of more than about 405 programs altogether. But when we compare this to the number of programs that we have in our register, which is more than 17,000 programs, it shows or it reflects that the number of programs in the ODL mode is actually not so it's not that many. But due to the pandemic, okay, 100% of the programs offered now are actually being conducted through ODL, although as in MQA, we do not actually require these institutions or program owners to come to MQA to request for the permit to run ODL for their respective programs. So we provide them the temporary measure for them to conduct the programs now through ODL mode, without having to actually obtain the license or the permission from MQA. And we also have other guidelines which are very beneficial for the institutions right now. We have micro-credentials, as I explained just now. So institutions can actually offer micro-credentials, and these can actually be offered through the online means as well. It allows institutions to offer smaller size credits to the learners or the students. And we also now encourage accreditation of prior experiential learning, or APEL, and the process of assessment of APEL is also now can be conducted through online means. And going into the virtual audit, so we have actually developed this process due to the pandemic itself. So we started with this virtual audit from July, and prior to this, we actually engaged with a lot of EQA or other agencies throughout the world, including Ban PT. Thank you very much, Prof. T. Basaruddin, for allowing us to benchmark with Ban PT and see how Ban PT has been doing the virtual audit all this while. So due to based on our benchmark and based on our study, we have come up with our own formula or recipe for our virtual audit. And as of now, we have already have quite a number of programs being accredited through this virtual means. So the procedure itself, if we go through the procedure, actually what the key points of this procedure is, based on our benchmark, we do not allow recording to take place. So because if we go through the physical audit, we do not record our proceedings or our audits as well. So we want to maintain the same procedure even when we go into this online or virtual audit. Okay, and the coordination meeting takes place through virtual means, but of course, the participants need to use their real names and institutions so that to enable us to distinguish who participates in the audit as well. Okay, and in terms of the coordination meeting, the MQA will actually be the one in charge of setting up the link and giving that to the higher education providers and the panel of assessors at least one day before the coordination meeting takes place. And then participants needs to check in the session through the link given 10 minutes before the session begins. Okay, and participants need to also turn on their webcams and web camera or camera throughout the coordination meeting, similar with what Dr. Sahil has mentioned. And as of 30th of November, a total of 67 programs evaluation have been conducted through this means, which includes 53 accreditation audits, 9 follow-up audits, and 5 compliance audits. And the issues and challenges that we face so far is in terms of the changing of the mode of teaching and learning and assessments to ODL, is the change of mindset among the students, among the lecturers, among the higher education institutions, among the people outside, because they always feel that ODL is a kind of like a second tier compared to the physical programs, okay, the conventional type programs. The issues with instrument to verify the learning, expertise to verify the learning, perception of the public, resources. Some of the institutions have issues with internet connectivity. And of course, the most important thing is the authenticity, or to how to actually verify or validate the authenticity of the learning. In terms of the audit that we conduct through the virtual audit, the issues more on the readiness of the institutions, of the panels, as far as also our officers in MQE, the etiquette, so integrity and the reliability of the system, and confidentiality of the documents has to be taken care of at all times. So there are many things that we can learn and still take opportunities for experimentation, innovation, for further improvement after this as well. So I think that's all from me. Thank you very much. I will welcome all questions after this. Thank you. Back to you, Dr. Jawahir.
Thank you very much, Professor Khairul, and it is very informative as well, and give us an idea of what's going on first in Malaysia, and look forward in education. Having the prior to the pandemic, you have all the distance learning and place is a great. So at least you were not taken sudden by the attack of the pandemic. You already been prepared, and your house was online. This is great. Also, your touch on the micro credential. Everybody is so about it as it's the future of education, or continuous education, mostly than that. Thank you very much, Khairul. And now we move to the discussant session, where our colleagues will be discussing the presentations given by our presenters today. We have two esteemed colleagues, Professor Dr. Amani Lubez. Professor Amani is Director of Universitas Islam Negeri Serf Hidayatullah in Jakarta. Her new position made her the first woman who served as Chancellor of the largest Islamic university in Indonesia. Congratulations, Professor Amani, and congratulations to all women as well. She was appointed as chairperson of the Indonesian Ulama Council for Women, Youth and Families for the 2015-2020 period. And our second discussant is Professor Fathul Wahid. Professor Fathul Wahid is Director of Universitas Islam Indonesia for 2018 to 2022. He was the head of Board of Academic Development at Universitas Islam Indonesia from 2014 until 2016. He has experience in various positions at university for more than 20 years. We would like to welcome our discussant and give them the floor to discuss the presentations. 5 minutes each, if you please arrange the time among you. تفضلوا. Professor Amani, تفضلي. The mute, can you unmute? Yes, okay.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Jawahir. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah amma ba'd. Peace be upon all of us. Honorable President of IQA, Association of Quality Assurance Agencies of the Islamic World, President of Executive Board, National Accreditation Agency for Higher Education, BAN PT Indonesia, Professor Chan, Honorable Dr. Jawahir Shaheen Al-Mudahki, Chief Executive Officer, Education Training Quality Authority, Bahrain, distinguished speakers, Professor Dr. Olgun Cicek from North Cyprus, Professor Khairul Saleh bin Muhammad Sahari from Malaysia, and Dr. Suhail Salim Bajamal from Saudi Arabia, Professor Fathul Wahid, Rector of Universitas Islam Indonesia, as a discussant today. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be one of the discussants of this important webinar, international webinar about higher education accreditation survival in the time of COVID-19. So allow me to begin as a discussion of this session, and I'll highlight some of the main issues of survival in the time of COVID pandemic. Let me share the share screen. Okay.
If it's difficult, Professor Aman, you can just, comment on the three presenters, please.
Okay, yes, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, okay. This is also a short notes from me. Yeah. Okay. So the main issues are about health, safety in the time of COVID-19 and how to prevent this disease to be spread in our society, and that will affect very much about the quality of our education system and also our higher education quality. So, and the second is about maintaining higher education services. We've heard from the the speakers, all of the speakers, all of the distinguished speakers about maintaining this the services, academic services, education services, in order to meet the need to ensure that education offered meets the expectation of students and the requirements of employers, both today and the future, and also how to ensure higher education quality by enhancing strategies of raising the quality of the higher education after the pandemic. So we can see also that we have constraint also for the promoting the new kind of accreditation in this new normal era. So the constraint is no site visits. Yeah, we use the online assessment. Accreditation does not cover existing situations. So the disruptions caused by COVID-19 caused uncertainty about the status of the students' learning outcomes, assessment, and also accreditation. And also one of the constraints is the coverage of accreditation instruments. We need to have a realistic compassion-driven course and program level assessment, and we need also some meaningful improvement to assessment and accreditation. As we see that we should reorient assessment and accreditation in the time of COVID-19 disruption. Yeah. Now about challenges. The challenges, I highlight the 4 challenges: regulation for the new normal, process and procedures, and also tools and instruments, also academic integrity. Academic integrity is very important because we should have honesty, fairness, and responsibility in the workplace, and also to give reward and punishment, so that accreditation will be the powerful tool of quality assurance and considered as a stamp, which shows institutions, higher education institutions have undergone improvements and enjoy public accountability. As for the about new normal accreditation, okay, this is my last slide, that we need the new legal framework for accreditation, developing new accreditation procedures, and also academic surveillance. All these are very important, so that we can think together to have accreditation, new accreditation, its values, practice, and policy to advocate promotion of accreditation quality through academic quality through accreditation. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Professor Amani. Now, Professor Fathul Wahed, the floor is yours. Tfadal.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jawahir. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah wa syukur ala ni'amillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah Muhammad ibn Abdillah la hawla wa la quwata illa billah amma ba'd. I thank Dr. Jawahir for the introduction, and I would like to use this opportunity also to thank Professor Basharuddin for inviting Universitas Islam Indonesia to join on board to host this important webinar collaboratively with BAN-PT, with LQA, and Universitas Islam Negeri Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta, and also Universitas Islam Negeri Maulana Malik Ibrahim Malang. I also thanks to the distinguished speakers for the very informative and inspiring presentation from 3 different contexts. The information provided indeed broaden our perspective, and I do believe that it will stimulate important and interesting further discussion. So the main issue here is survival during the time of pandemic, which we don't know yet when the pandemic will end. So that's why what we can do now is by doing our best and always pray for the best. So in the last week, for example, we witnessed the development of vaccine that brighten up our hope, but at the same time, we should also manage our expectation, as the development of vaccine will take time, and it also will take time to all the world population getting vaccinated. The vaccine should be effective, but at the same time, it should be also affordable, as not all countries will have sufficient budget to provide the vaccine free to all their citizens. So I bring this issue into the table as the context of our discussion. So the message is that during the survival period, the main keyword is adaptation. I think previous speakers already mentioned it. And when the time is not on our side, we can call it quick adaptation, or more precisely, contextualized quick adaptation. Why contextualization is very important here? As I understood from the presentation from 3 different contexts, different countries, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, and North Cyprus, I learned that all depart from similar understanding on the changes impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and use similar concept. But the policy operationalization may vary. This is the case when we see the issue from the perspective of accreditation bodies, from higher level perspective, national or even international point of view. But when we are descending to the lower level perspective, more operational perspective on the ground, at the university level, we can see, but at this level, the response to the COVID-19 pandemic even vary to a great extent. This can be explained by several factors that may relate to the contextual readiness. I think Dr. Hairul already mentioned it, the readiness. Although I do believe with those varieties, all universities are striving, doing their best to provide the possible best education quality to the students, to produce what previous speaker called competent graduates. What I will say here is, if we agree on the issue of contextual specificity, some question may emerge. For example, how to translate this issue into national standard of accreditation. This may lead to another question of granularity, the level of details of the accreditation instrument. Hence, additional questions include, in this context, should the accreditation body focus on the big ideas, for example, quality of teaching and learning, and let the individual university choose its own argumentative approach. Let it translate into the ideas of, for example, more responsible quality, internal quality assurance, for example. This is the issue of the granularity of the standard of all criteria. The second question, even more intriguing, as we now are more focusing on outcome-based education, should the accreditation standard emphasize mainly or heavily on the output and the outcome part of the education process without paying too much attention on the input and process part, and let the individual university define the latter, the process, the input and the process part by its own approaches and standard. This is the issue of the focus of accreditation standard or criteria. I do hope that these two issues, the granularity of the standard and the focus of standard, are relevant to our discussion, not only during the survival period, but perhaps also beyond the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. The answer of these issues will influence our approach in managing quality assurance, both at the national level that need to be responded, for instance, by regulation adjustment and institutional rearrangement, and also at the university level that may be translated into more responsible internal quality standard, more innovative education processes, and so on and so forth. This option hopefully will lead, or at least cultivate, the culture of quality, which is eventually will be institutionalized or inherently embedded in day-to-day business processes. At the first sight, we may consider it as a responsive initiative to create room for tolerance, but it has nothing to do with the quality compromise, because we can also see it as a call, we can also call it as the less for more perspective in quality assurance, which is, to my opinion, maybe scrutinize its possibilities to be adopted in the challenging time as nowadays during the COVID-19 pandemic, when uncertainty is high, the environmental changes may happen unexpectedly, and the resources become more scarce and more limited. If the pandemic prolongs,
Thank you, Professor.
okay.
Can finalize your point, please?
Okay, so
Thank you.
about 1 minute, yeah. So if the pandemic prolongs, lasts for a longer term, its worst impact had not yet come. For sure, we are obliged to hope for the best, but we should prepare for the worst, or even the grim scenario. I hope this is my stimulus for the discussion. I should stop here and let other speakers and audience share their perspective. I thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Professor Fathul Wahid. We had a great time listening at our presenters today and the discussant point of view on all of these presentation or the view of our webinar today. Now, the remaining half an hour of our webinar will be for the audience or the participants to ask questions and suggest the speaker that they want them to answer, or maybe it's a general question in this case. For me, I will be leaving the webinar because I have another important obligation. Professor Amani will be chairing the remaining, all the speakers, the discussant, and mostly to thank Professor Basardin, the president of IQA, for giving this opportunity to all of us to see the views from different areas on the pandemic and how to look forward and how did we prepare for it. And I hope that all of our participants had a good idea of what need to be implemented back home, wherever you are from. Thank you very much, and I will leave you in good hand with my good friend, Professor Amani. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much. Okay, Alhamdulillah, we've heard about the presentations of all of the distinguished speakers and also two discussants. And we now begin the question and answer session. Thank you very much for giving me also the chance to chair because Dr. Jawahir have another meeting. And please, the audience, from the audience or yeah, from the IQA also, I give the chance to deliver some questions or commentaries about the topic today. It's about higher education accreditation survival in the time of COVID-19. Yeah.
Can I ask a question, Bu Amani?
Okay, our professor.
Shirazi.
Yeah, Professor Shirazi.
Yes.
Yes, please, the floor is yours.
Yes. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thanks for the opportunity to ask a question. First of all, I would like to say that this seminar is a very excellent opportunities for leaders of Islamic higher education institution from all around the world to share experiences during the difficult time. So my question is, what can we really share, in facing the challenge of this crisis? Because in my perspective, there are at least 5 aspects that we need to look at, something that we really can share. First of all, about the policies. Yeah, what policies are interesting, helpful, have been helpful in a certain institution that we can share for other countries. Secondly, I think in terms of the digital infrastructure, yeah, maybe Malaysia, does not have this problem with digital infrastructures, but Indonesia, I think, still, facing a lot of trouble in terms of the internet facilities, in terms of the internet access. So probably we can share experiences in how to, solve this problem. Thirdly, I think in terms of teaching design, I think in Indonesia, in many cases, a lot of lecturers are providing, lessons, teaching contents are designed for offline studies. Then it is applied for online studies. Then there's the problem will emerge, With the lectures, have problem. So in our opinion, teaching design for online studies should have a lot of differences from what we design for offline studies. I think in the next issue, the fourth issues, I think in Indonesia, the question of the learning application. In Indonesia, I think we are using 10,000s of learning applications. Some are using Zoom, some are meeting Google Meet, some are using other application. I think for us to have a certain standard of online studies that can be assessed evaluated, that can be standardized, then I think there is a need to think of an application, a learning application that could apply, parallel to, to our institution. So we can exchange, so lectures can exchange, our students can exchange their teaching content. Otherwise, we are running by ourselves without any connection to the others. And the fifth issue, I think, is the readiness of the human resources. So I surprised when brothers from Malaysia also mentioned that in Malaysia, there are still many lectures are not well, equipped, with the competencies to handle, online teaching. I think this is also the case with Indonesia. So, and also with students, students from remote areas in Indonesia facing a lot of problem in, following online studies. So I think what can we share in this, in terms of these experiences? So,
yes,
hopefully next semester, next year,
a lot of questions.
our online teaching will be better and better. Thank you very much. Sorry, long question.
Yeah, thank you,
Warahmatullahi
Professor.
wabarakatuh.
You have many of the questions, and according to our schedule, we will end in or at 4 p.m. so that we still have to have one more who will ask to the speakers, and I see also a lot of questions in the chat room, so that the speakers can see the questions in the chat room and then can answer also. Because of is there any question from the floor, from the audience?
Professor Amani, with your permission, I think I have seen on the chat a few questions directed to myself. So can I just jump in?
Oh, yes, please, Professor.
Appreciate that. One of the questions says that in a virtual accreditation visit, how do you control the quality of visit activity, such as during interviews? If the questionnaire owner can elaborate a little bit, but what I have understood that yes, the control is the expert panel, let's say 5 people, there's a chair of the panel, so everything is prepared beforehand, even the questions are there, so it's structured, the time frame is there, the person to be interviewed is known, so it's a little bit clear. So the control is not that difficult as we might thought. But when you practice, you will see that it's like the same, except just changing some emotional sharings or a coffee or tea with your colleagues. But the rest for me is very much similar during the virtual visit, if this is the question that I can answer really. And also, I think my colleague, Professor Hasret would like to ask a question. With your permission, maybe she can continue or...
Okay, please, Professor Hasret. Are you there?
Hocam? Maybe she's disconnected. Yes, Hocam.
Oh, maybe because of the...
Okay, maybe later, Thank you very much for the opportunity,
You're welcome. Yes. Is there anyone who asked also right away? if not, I'll give the time for the speakers, all the speakers, to answer the questions from Professor Muhammad Shirazi and also the questions from the chat room. Please, Professor Khairul Saleh.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Amanis. Basically, there are maybe 5 questions brought up by Prof. Sirozi. So I think the institutions of in Indonesia or maybe all around the world can learn from each other, definitely, through engagement. You can directly contact, your partner institutions, because they will different institutions will have different ways of managing the situation. They will design their own method, which is basically suitable to them. And this is a good time to actually go through there's a lot of webinars going on, especially, during, and the good thing about this COVID-19 is that all these the seminars are conducted online. So, and it's normally free of charge. So there's a lot of sharing going on in the internet, and you can get a lot of information, a lot of knowledge from sharing among institutions. I think that is number one. In terms of connectivity, so of course there is, even in Malaysia, we have issues of connectivity in certain areas. Not all areas are privileged to get a very fast internet connection. So for example, there is one state that actually we have the institution to report to the government that 40% of its population of students do not have internet access. So that 40%, or maybe only 40% of the students get internet access. So the remaining 60% do not have internet access. That is basically also happening in Malaysia as well. So what is our point from MQA perspective is that I shared the document on the open and distance learning. So we have the guidelines on how to conduct open and distance learning type programs. So it is not just about, as you said, correctly said, transitioning or transforming or putting whatever we do or conducted on offline and push it to become online. So it doesn't work that way. It's not as straightforward as you just translate or share your PowerPoints in the online, and then you conduct a class through Google Classroom, or you do Zoom, you do Microsoft Teams, WebEx. So there are so many platforms out there, but the important thing is how you blend between what we call as the synchronous, which is the real time, and the asynchronous, which is the non-real time session. So the non-synchronous or the asynchronous part is actually more important, because in open and distance learning, we are talking about how students can actually get records or recordings of the lectures, the materials that you will share in your what we call as the LMS or learning management system. So institutions should subscribe to a good LMS platform. We have, for example, we have Moodle. So maybe even some institutions, they even develop their own learning management system. So sharing of and having this system in place is very important in online or remote learning. So because not all students have the privilege of getting into the classroom on time at that particular point of time. So they may need to share with their siblings, with their parents. They may only have one computer at home. So what is important is if we provide these materials for them to refer to at any time of their choice, it is better. So that is the most important thing in ODL or open distance learning. So the materials have to be prepared accordingly. And how do you ensure assessments? It's not about having the assessments itself, is how about you proctor or you actually invigilate or monitor the quality to ensure the authenticity of the answer from the students. So the authenticity part is the difficult part, because anyone can actually, they can actually ask anyone to actually submit or come up with the solution for them. So proctoring or e-proctoring in this case is very important. So some institutions, they do invest into e-proctoring, although that might be very expensive. Some of the institutions, they do hybrid, where they actually conduct the classes online, but the examinations are done through physical means. So you can actually have that kind of methods as well. So this is very, very flexible. Again, it depends on the regulation of the situation at the moment, where you are allowed to have a mass gathering or not. So all this can take into consideration. Even in Malaysia, for example, there are certain courses or programs that requires clinical, practical components, which cannot be substituted through online or simulation means. They still need to go to hospitals. They still need to go to the laboratories. So we do allow students to go back into the laboratories, but they need to be, there must be social distancing. So there must be proper planning from the institutions. For example, maybe before the pandemic, they can allow 30 students to come in, but now maybe they will only be able to accommodate half of that. So they need to, instead of one session, they need to break it up into 2, 3, or 4 sessions. So that are some of the things that I think institutions have to adapt and adjust themselves to. I think that is roughly, if I didn't answer all your questions, I'm very sorry, because maybe I forgot some of the points. Thank you.
Can I have a comment, Prof. Amani?
Oh, yes, Professor
Olgun. Yes, sorry for interrupting, but regarding this cost of virtual assessment compared to offline assessment, it says, and my colleague said that, yes, they have a fixed fee, so it doesn't really change. But my concern is in terms of if there is an expert panel, and even in this expert panel, if there are some international experts from abroad or from neighboring countries, or even from universities within the country, and their travel costs and accommodation costs and other costs were there. But when it comes to virtual site visits, I think this diminished maybe 2/3 or even more. So that might be an advantage for the agencies in terms of budgetary concerns. The only difference that I could highlight at this stage, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Yes, and now we would like to hear the answers from Dr. Suhail Salim Bajamal.
Thank you very much, Professor Lobis. I've been listening to the discussion, the questions, and reading through the questions. I think we need to have a couple of more webinars to discuss all of these very hot topics. I will briefly answer the points raised by Professor Sirozi. However, maybe initially I will touch base on what Professor Wahid has mentioned. I think these two concepts that he talked about, the bigger picture, the balance between the bigger picture of quality assurance versus the granularity of the standards. And that's always, I always say, the challenge between, I like this setup today because it's the Quality Assurance Agency and the higher education institutions leaders are sitting on the same table, I would say, or meeting on the same Zoom room, because there is always that challenge between saying, less is more, and what is less, how much is less is less. I think that really depends on each country and on the maturity of the higher education system, the establishment of the higher education, the whole culture of quality assurance in the system. Even you see in some of the states, the big picture standards differ from regions to regions in the states, and that has some implicit and explicit reasons. So I agree with you, Prof. Wahid. If we can, as Quality Assurance Agency, guarantee that looking at the bigger picture and focusing on outcomes only, and this is a switch in that if you look historically through all the Quality Assurance Agency, they evolve. They start with focusing on input and processes, and then they evolve into focusing on outcomes and really linking to the labor market and having professional societies linked and what have you, and even decision makers, decision making for the accreditation to be a mix between academia and industry. So this is a normal evolution. As you mentioned, maybe because of the COVID-19, now this evolution, it will be catalyzed faster by the COVID-19. So I totally agree with that. In terms of the points that Prof. Siruzza mentioned, they are brilliant points. In terms of the policies sharing, that will again depend on the differences between institutions, the regional, even within the same country, as mentioned by Prof. Saleh. In the same country, you'll have regions in remote areas that will have challenges, so they need to develop their own policies and procedures accordingly. A platform like this, like the IQA, this is the beauty of the IQA, is to have a network of quality assurance agency globally with membership of higher education institutions from the Islamic world and similar regional, the Asian, the Arab network and the African network and so on. So they will really share their expertise openly together, and their expertise, I would say, lessons learned, what worked and what didn't work. So I might tell you what worked for me, but it wouldn't be working for you for sure because of the different context, or what Prof. Wahid said, the contextualization of the quality assurance. So, but what I would say, this has worked for me because of these reasons, and this didn't work for me because of these reasons. You might find that what didn't work for me will work perfectly for you. He talked about the teaching design and the learning application. Prof. Saleh mentioned there are many solutions, open source solutions. Again, IQA with the collaboration. You've heard, all of you know edX. So it's a collaboration between different universities. That could be an initiative by IQAX, an initiative by member universities to do something similar in really building resources available, like a pool of resources, to lower the cost and really to have the concept of sharing knowledge and knowledge transfer and what have you. You've talked about the digital infrastructure and the teaching design. That's why what worked in Saudi Arabia, maybe it wouldn't work in other countries, is we have an entity for licensing, and they focus on the technical aspects, and they are all technical people. And then we managed all our e-learning and distance education quality assurance standards similar to the regular ones, with additional standards that really ensure the fairness, the interactivity, the synchronous and asynchronous, and all of those aspects. So I hope that I've touched on the major point that Prof. Siruzza brilliantly highlighted the issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Suhail. And still have one question from Professor Hassan. Would you like to see a question? It's written in the chat room. Are you still there? Okay. If it's not,
she just sent me a text message saying that there is an internet connection problem. That's why she couldn't maybe reach out. But yeah, the question is there.
yes.
The COVID-19 pandemic has necessitated that many activities that were formerly accomplished in a face-to-face manner now be completed virtually. What should be the main points while selecting the experts for the virtual site visits?
Okay.
That's a good question. Yeah, thank you, Professor. Yeah, let me elaborate just a little bit. To be honest, really, it's a challenge for us as academics or senior academics, let's say. We have to adapt ourselves with the new technology in the digital era. So we need to learn these Zoom kind of communication tools. And The challenge for the online site visits and evaluation is also the communication between the team members. So prior to meeting, you have to do many meetings for preparation. You have to go through the files and the files exchange online. You have to store them and go through them and analyze, ask questions and share and so forth. So during the site visit, virtual site visit, you have to schedule the timings, you have to schedule the departments, the programs, and the people, even the questions, as I said. So it's lots of time-consuming and detailed analytic work that you have to carry out. So when choosing the experts, you have to make sure that the experts are fully dedicated for that period, the time span for the virtual site visit, because it's really like a full-time dedication for the whole day and sometimes night. It depends on wherever the location is. So the time difference is another issue. And they have to be very much practical and eligible using the technology tools, the internet connection infrastructures, as we have experiencing sometimes, all around the world. So these are the main things that we have to know. Of course, the experts has to be very much experienced in the site visit as well as the IT technology, so the combination would make sense.
Okay. If you allow me, Prof. Lopez.
Thank you, Professor. Yeah, would you like to add something?
Yes, I agree with what Professor Cechik mentioned. I would add to that planning. Failure to plan is planning to fail. It's much more challenging to have a successful virtual visit with one of the questions saying the validity. Is it really measuring what intends to measure? Is it really fair with the students? And that has to do with the quality of the experts. We know that these are the database of experts that we have utilized in the past 10 years or so. So planning and having webinars prior to the visits and clear instruction during the visit, and having a dedicated person. We have through all the 4 days, one dedicated person for each visit from day and night. They are available throughout the visit to troubleshoot any issue. We are learning, and week by week we're learning this. We're learning. We have a feedback for the programs. We have six questionnaires sent for each visit. So we're asking the program about each reviewer, how was he or she, how was his or her communication skills and virtual managing the virtual meeting and all of that. And we are asking the members of the panel, we are asking the chair of the panel, we're asking the students. So it's a 360 evaluation, and based on that, each reviewer will have a profile, and then we'll have continuous improvement. We are planning to have, a program for 1 day virtual meeting, managing virtual meeting accreditation skills. So really to fill in the gap, our experts on the floor, on real visits, how are we going to transform them into even super expert in virtual visits? So I totally agree with what Prophet Cechik mentioned.
Yes, thank you very much.
Can I just finalize one long sentence? I think really it's interesting. This is getting very exciting, and I'm very happy to share and hear all these with my colleagues. Believe me, what I have experienced in the US, the same discussions, the same challenges, the same problems. When I come here in the European scale, it is the same thing and the same issues with the agencies as well as the universities. So what we are doing now in the Middle East and Asia part is the same. So as I said, we are in the same boat. We are all having the same problems and challenges, and we have the same, almost similar mindset as an international intellectual academics. And I'm sure we are finding the right path and roadmap for ourselves as universities as well as the agencies. So let's keep sharing these good practices. Let's learn with practice, experience, and share each other. I'm sure we'll get out of all these, and we will have a more connected and collaborated academic world. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yes,
And
thank you
if I can add a bit,
yes.
from our perspective, I think I do agree with what Prof. Cechik and Dr. Sohail has mentioned. from our perspective, what we also do is we have about 1,500 panel of assessors registered with MQA. And when we wanted to start with this virtual audit, what we do is we reach out to our panels, because our panels are also evaluated. As mentioned by Dr. Sohail, we have a 360 evaluation. And our panels are assessed by both the institutions as well as the officers who accompany them from MQA. And we do conduct trainings before we actually appoint any assessors for the virtual audit. That's number one, because they need to be familiar with the difference in terms of processes when you do through the physical visit versus the virtual visit. So we want to ensure that the panels are well versed with the protocols and the procedures. So these are some of the additional things that we also do to ensure that the panels that we select are ready for virtual audits. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Khairul. And I'd like to add some from Indonesia, from the Indonesian experience. In my university, for example, Sharif Hidayatullah State Islamic University, we have experienced many of virtual site visits, and Alhamdulillah, we got all A grade, Alhamdulillah, and thanks to the clear instruction from our agency, from National Agency of Accreditation for Higher Education. Thank you very much. And as for this webinar, I'd like to thank all of the speakers and also the steering committee and also organizing committee for having this important seminar. This is very important to have exchange of experiences and also ideas about accreditation in the time of pandemic or after pandemic, inshallah. Thank you very much, and I'll give the floor, or I'll give back the time for the Master of Ceremony. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Amani Lubis, and all of the speakers who have shared some best practices to us here in the webinar. And now we are reaching the end of our first session today. Before you go, don't forget to keep yourself updated on the official IQA website for information from IQA and for the second session of the first series on December 15th, 2020. And for participants who request the material, they all will be uploaded on Islamic QA world.org/webinar 2020. They will be ready 12 hours from now. You can also start registering for the next webinar, which will be on Tuesday, December 15th, 2020, through the link s.id/IQA webinar 15 DEC. And don't forget to fill out the form to get a certificate in s.id/IQA webinar, and it will be open up for 30 minutes after the end of this event. Thank you for coming to these sessions today. I hope there are plenty of things we could learn today amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. See you next week for our second session, Higher Education Accreditation, Survival in the Time of COVID-19. On behalf of the Committee of IQA International Webinar 2020, I am Muhammad Rizki Utama, signing off from Yogyakarta. Have a nice day. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.